When I was a kid, there was two things I liked to do: play Army, fly. So when I got down to fly and be a flight medic, I figured, it's kind of a dream come true.
As a medic, you only have like a big aid bag with you, and what you have is what you have. Being a combat medic, you pretty much not necessarily specialize in anything particular. You just hope you can save their life from whatever's going on with them.
The basic mantra for a medic, you can sum it up: do the most good for as many as you can.
My ideals were that I would treat everyone. I was a medic, I would provide medical care. It wasn't me to judge the person that was in front of me.
And I was sitting in the back with the troops, and they were laughing at me. And they were calling me an FNG. That means funny new guy. Then they seen the caduceus on my collar, and they said, "Oh, he's a medic." And they said, "We better be nice to this guy because he may be saving our ass down the road." Well, I just graduated from high school, and I didn't have the money to go to college, and I was kind of a patriotic soul, so I joined the service. I figured that I could get some education and also serve my country.
I've always wanted to be in the military ever since I was a little girl. My father and my grandfather before me were in the military, and I have one sibling, brother, and then cousins that I was the only girl out of all that, so I pretty much had to play with the boys, so we played Army a lot.
Before I went into the military, I was struggling. I had a new son. I was getting newly married, kind of starting life, and times got tough, and so I was thinking, I want to go do medical anyways in my life, so I'll go check out the Army. So I started talking to a recruiter. He got me pointed in the right direction.
Working 3 and 4 jobs just to make ends meet, trying to figure out how I could go to college and pay for college instead of being in debt. I was driving down the road one day, saw the recruiter's office, and went, "Hey, I know they got the Army College Fund," so that's what I went to.
I was living with my sister in an apartment across the hall from another guy who had just gotten off of active duty and was transferring from the Army Reserve to the National Guard. And I just happened to catch him when he was walking out the door. "Hey, where are you going?" "Oh, I'm going down there to see the recruiter." He said, and I said, "Well, I always thought about joining." And he said, "Well, why don't you come with me?" I'm like, "Okay."
I attended basic training at Fort Carson here in Colorado. And I have to tell you, I was 17 and I was pretty excited about going to basic training because at that time there was a draft. And many of the enlisted personnel were 21 to 26 years old, and it was good at 17 years old to be able to compete with older guys physically and mentally, and I thought it was a personal challenge. And so I gained weight in basic training because I was in such good condition when I went, and others tended to lose, and they had a hard time keeping up. But I had a good time in basic training.
My basic training was at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. When we very first get there, they're pretty much yelling at you in your face and getting in the what they call cattle trucks. If you've seen like the ones that they actually carry cattle in, they have similar ones for us, but they all pack us in there with all our bags and everything, and they're called cattle trucks. And you're in there scared to death, wondering what's going on, getting ready to go to your companies and everything, and then when you get there, they're yelling at you the whole time, "Get your stuff," you're fumbling and falling down and finally getting to where you need to go. But it's kind of a scary ordeal, but it settles down after a while.
First of all, I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, which is basically home of the infantry. So when I found out I was going there, I thought, oh wow, I'm in for a treat. It's one of the few posts that are actually all male There's no female there. And it's pretty tough. I remember just kind of bonding with everybody inside of my platoon that I had never even known at all. You know, the first time we'd met was when we all showed up here. In the very, very beginning, when we first got there, they kind of put you in a holding spot, and it's just big rows of barracks and beds and bunk beds and all that good stuff. And they wind up having you do like PT tests, push-ups, sit-ups, and all that stuff. So you always try your hardest, but little do you know that when you go down range, you're getting put into different categories, like super fast runners, middle class runners, lower class runners. So if you tried your hardest and you got to the fast group, you were running about 5 miles a day. So lesson learned.
What do I remember most about basic training? Being tired, being yelled at, being move here, move there, hurry up and wait is what we did. So you got moved like cattle, and you got moved to one spot, and this is where they would do everything with you, and then they'd take the whole group of you and they would move you to another spot and they would do everything. It was very organized and very precise, so you had to be at certain spots at the time. But other than that, little sleep and a lot of exercise and a lot of practice.
It's St. Patrick's Day, 1997. I am 30 years old, and I'm about to go to basic training. My buddies say, hey, come on, we're gonna take you out before you have to report to the hotel. Okay, no problem. So from about 7 o'clock in the morning on St. Patrick's Day till 5 o'clock that night when I had to be at the hotel, we pretty much had a good St. Patrick's Day. And then I had to go to the MEPS station, and MEPS is Military Entrance Processing Station. It's where everybody goes for them to send you to wherever you're gonna go ship to. So I'm in there at MEPS and I am hung over, and I had to spend almost the entire day. So we had to be there at 4 o'clock in the morning. We wind up not leaving the MEPS station until 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and basically we just sat there. I had fun at basic, being 30 years old and watching all these little 18-year-olds. I can see how it would be hard for somebody, being away from home for the first time and stuff. I can. Being 30, I was like, stop crying.
We flew our entire unit of personnel to a place in Japan. It was right outside of Yokohama, called Kashini Barracks. And Kashini Barracks had been a R&R camp from when the Korean War was really at its peak, but it still existed there. So we took this R&R camp and we're going to make it into a general hospital. We were there in December, I think about the 15th of December, 1965. By about the 15th of January, we had a 1,000-bed hospital and we had over 1,200 patients. It was a very busy hospital. We were getting casualties from Vietnam. Most of them had come back having some surgery, some come back without having had any surgery. So we were really doing a lot of surgery care, preparing them so we could send them back to America. And I was there for about 18 months, and I wanted to go to Vietnam. I was stationed in an evac hospital. And as the war was there, because of the helicopters, as soon as a patient was knocked down or hurt, we were able to pick him up. And they would bring him immediately to an evac hospital where we could begin treatment and care. And the soldiers, when they sustained really, really massive wounds, it was highly critical. In fact, we knew that if we could get a patient, no matter how bad he was injured, within an hour after he was hurt, we could most likely save his life. And we called it the golden hour.
I love being a medic, and I was a medic through my entire career. At first I was a ground medic, and then when I came back from Iraq, I was able to become a flight medic. And that was probably my most favorite thing, is flying in the helicopters and being able to do what we call rescue hoists, where we dangle out of the helicopter on a jungle penetrator, and that was my favorite part. When I was there in Iraq, my role was a medic, and depending on what we had going for the day or whatever. Sometimes we'd go out on missions, on convoy missions, and other days that we'd stay back and either be what we call ambulance, where we drive the ambulance to go pick up patients from the helicopters and bring them into the hospital that we were at. And we were stationed with the 21st Cash out of Fort Hood, Texas. And then if we weren't doing the ambulance part of it, we're doing the clinic, which is like sick call, like going, like if you were to go to the doctor, you'd go into the doctor's office, and we'd kind of have our own little area that was set up, and we had tents. We didn't have buildings or anything like that, so it was a big tent city that we had made up into a hospital. Being a combat medic, you pretty much not necessarily specialize in anything particular. You just hope you can save their life from whatever's going on with them. We had a lot of amputations, eviscerations, which is where your guts are hanging out. As a medic, you only have like a big aid bag with you, and what you have is what you have. When we were there, there's it's called a mass casualty, like how the Aurora shooting happened as a mass casualty for everybody, where everybody had to go to different hospitals. Well, we would have those out there also. And like 50 guys can come in. So I mean, in one day, we could treat over 100 people.
I went to Iraq the first time February 23rd of 2003 is when I stepped foot actually in Kuwait. That was before everything had kicked off. They were still building up bases, waiting for stuff to come in off the port and everything, equipment and all that good stuff. And then I did my year tour there, and then I came home. The second time that I went was in 06, 08, and it was completely different. In aviation, you pretty much get everything. You get the top of the line, everything. Night vision goggles, top of the line. Uniforms, top of the line. Everything. And we were a GSAB, so we had a whole bunch of different aircraft companies compiled into one big battalion. We could support ourselves with everything, basically. But that one, I had connexes to live in, a bed to sleep in, 3 meals cooked. I didn't have to do the MRE thing. I was really lucky. Everything you do, you work out of your aid bag for the most part. So if you have a patient in the aircraft, you're going to take your aid bag and you're going to spread it all out, because that's all your stuff. You don't really have like an ambulance where you have a cabinet of all your IV stuff, and then you have a cabinet over here of all your bandage stuff, and then over here. It's not like that. You got to open up your bag and just go with what you got. For the medevac, what would happen is there was a radio frequency that they could call, and people would call 9-line, which gave us some information so that we knew we were going to. And then we would launch, and part of that 9-line is their grid coordinate. So we would fly to that grid coordinate, and then we would look for smoke as a marker, and then we would talk to the ground and make sure the ground was clear, and then we would come in and land, and then I would go meet with a medic, a field medic, or I would go into an aid station and do like a critical transport or something from an aid station to the hospital.
I was deployed to the Persian Gulf. We landed in Saudi Arabia Christmas Eve of 1990, and then we left April of 1991. I was in a unit, it was called the 26th Forward Support Unit. And the way the support unit was made up is you had your physicians part, and they were part of what they called a treatment team. So you had the physicians, then you had the treatment team, and you had the ambulance platoon. And the ambulance platoon, we pretty much primarily dealt with doing the quick stabilization on the ground, loading them into the vehicles, stabilizing them in our vehicles to move them back to the treatment team. We did a lot of humanitarian aid, helping the refugees. And so I got a lot of practice with helping birthing babies and getting to see, you know, little kids. They would find the cluster bombs that we had deployed out, and they were primary colors of red, blue, and yellow, and they were hand size. So the kids would pick them up and start to play with them, and all of a sudden they would blow up, and they would be injured. So they, you know, they would come in and we'd patch them up, fix them up. A lot of the kids would come up to our vehicles and ask for candy. And since we were so generously rewarded with a lot of candy from the States, we would share it. So it was pretty nice. It was, you know, that type of interaction was, you know, great and fun. During combat, the amount of people that I treated during combat actually was very low. It was spread out over the battle I was in. The injured were spread out over the different infantry units and the different brigades. And our numbers were really low comparatively. You know, it was such a different world than, you know, the Afghan war and the Iraq war, where they had to deal with IEDs. You know, we drove through minefields, but we had the minesweepers in front of us, and so we really didn't have a lot of that issue. So it was my very short period of time when we actually got fired upon, and one of our tanks in my unit, 47th unit, was hit. And the driver was killed. The tank commander, who I took care of, had his leg blown off from below the knee. And then the gunners, they were shell-shocked from the loud, you know, from the bursts of the anti-tank round. So I took care of, his name was Sergeant Wiggins. I took care of him and brought him back. And that's pretty much the only war casualty that I injured that I took care of.
I got deployed to Baghdad, which was my first trip to Iraq, and that's where I met up with the Ohio National Guard, Charlie Company, 118th Air Support Medical Battalion. And I was the non-commissioned officer in charge, NCOIC, of the Golby Troop Medical Clinic in Baghdad, Iraq, from 04 to 05. When I was running that was running the emergency room in Baghdad. There was a transportation route, it's called Route Irish. And at one point in time, it was the most deadliest road in the world, because everybody would travel along it, and that's where all the IEDs would happen. And we were pretty much the only ER for a significant distance on either side. We were almost like dead in the middle of it, so we would get everything. Everything would just come to us. I had 6 ambulances that I would dispatch out on the calls on the base, and then I had the ER that I had to contend with and making sure that they were running and taking care of the patients. So we would have sick call regularly during the day, and then we'd have the emergency room that would do all the emergency room stuff that we need to. So the cough, sniffles, and wheezes and everything would come through, so we had to deal with that. And then all the major traumatic cases you could name, we saw it. Then on the next trip to Iraq, we went to Balad, and that's when I was a full-on medevac medic and took an entire company to Iraq and back. Like that. And that's a total different skill set with going back to flying into picking up patients with the equipment that you have in the helicopter.
There was no chaos in surgery. Everybody knew what they were supposed to do, and everybody did it. And days and nights for weeks on end, we were overwhelmed with casualties. To tell you about some of the casualties that we took I have to mention this one individual. His name was Rory Bailey. Bailey had just turned 20 years old. He sustained injuries that blew away both of his eyes, his upper orbit and his lower orbit. It blew away his nose, it blew away his upper jaw and his lower jaw and his tongue. Rory had lost forever his speech, his sense of taste, his sense of smell, his vision, and he could not ever speak again. Rory had lost his face. Our maxillofacial surgeons had the greatest challenge of their careers before them. Rory was on our operating room tables for over 18 hours. And Jack, our technician, refused to leave or have relief until his surgeons had finished all they could do to possibly do the best for Rory. Rory left the 24th Evacuation Hospital 2 days later in air ambulance for the United States. Years later, Rory was on the cover of Life and People magazines as the man with no face, but Rory lived to be 60 years old.
We're at the end of the deployment, you know, and where we were, we had our tent set up and away from the hospital with our because our unit was separate from the big hospital, and we had our unit headquarters on one side of the fob, and we had all our vehicles lined up out there, and I was using a computer, writing emails to my family and everything, and next thing I know, I'm on the ground because this huge boom came in, and I was on the ground and I was outside, and it happened so quick because it scared everybody because it was so close. It was within a 50-meter range of where we were, and what had happened was an air blast came in, and that night you couldn't really see because it was pitch dark, so you couldn't see what damage that it really did or anything. I mean, we found big pieces of shrapnel everywhere. Well, the next day I got called into the lieutenant's into the tent because I was over working my medic stuff, and I thought I was in trouble. I was like, what'd I do? They're like, hey, heard you were sitting here last night. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, this is yours. And I'm like, what? And they're like, it was found in the filing cabinet behind you, and it would have directly hit me in the head if I wouldn't have ducked down sooner.
If you're on mission, you sleep with a radio next to your head, so if the radio goes off, you get up, you go fly your mission. There's no set schedule for it other than you're on duty for 24 hours and then you're off for maybe 12, or if a medic is sick, then you're gonna fill in for that medic, and then it just, I don't know, you work a lot. I treated everything from a cough to missing limbs to gunshot wounds to blast injuries to burns, pretty much just about everything. I think the hardest thing that was for me to deal with was kids, little babies, young kids. I mean, they get caught up in all this stuff and they don't know what's going on. They're just doing what they're told, or they're with their parent or whatever. Seeing the kids get all messed up it's tough to swallow. And you want to try that much harder to save them, you know. But sometimes it doesn't always work out like that.
We had a choice when we first went over to the Persian Gulf, whether we chose to treat the enemy or not. My ideals were that I would treat everyone. You know, I was a medic, I would provide medical care. It wasn't me to judge the person that was in front of me, but to take care of their injuries. We were over the berm, so we were in Iraq, and we were stopped. 4-7 had stopped for a break, and they had captured some prisoners of war, some Iraqi soldiers. And one of the Iraqi soldiers, the officer, was injured. So we get out our litter and everything, and we bind his wounds, and we get him on the litter, and we get everything done. And one of the soldiers said, excuse me, ma'am. I said, yes, because, you know, they spoke Iraq. And he goes, he doesn't want you in that vehicle when he goes. And I pointed to my vehicle. I said, that vehicle? And he says, yes. And I said, but that's my vehicle. Where that vehicle goes, I go. And he says, yes, but he doesn't, you're a woman, and he doesn't want you on that vehicle. And so I pointed to the side and I said, do you see my name on the side of that vehicle? And he says, yes. I said, it's my vehicle. I go where it goes. And he goes, well, he doesn't want you to. I said, well, that's fine, because he doesn't have to go. So I bent down and I just lifted the litter and rolled him back onto the sand, picked my litter up and started walking back to my vehicle. Well, lo and behold, what did he do? He changed his mind. And so I was able to, we were able to put him back on the litter, and I looked at my tank commander, Sergeant Perkins, and I looked at him and I said, you get to take care of him, I will drive.
There was a Romanian national who had become a U.S. citizen and was in the New York Army Reserve. His name was Sergeant Caitlin Dima. This happened on a Saturday. That morning, Sergeant Dima had got promoted to sergeant. He had actually gotten promoted that morning. He was 7 days away from going home. In the mortar attack, he was killed. He was 31 years old, had a wife and kids at home. He was a school teacher at a local high school. He came in with a whole bunch of other ones. I mean, my medics, they literally ran from their hooches right to where they were, and I had my on-duty crews going. They were there, and they got him in right away, and did what we could. And he was dead.
I did well up to my time in retirement, and the command was located. It was at the 6th Army Command, but our command headquarters were located in the Presidio of California. And my immediate commander, Bird Colonel Douglas Horn, he said, "Rod, I don't want you to get out. I want you to stay in." And he said, "The general wants you to stay in too, and he wants to personally talk to you about staying in the Army." So they flew me down to Presidio, and they asked me to stay in the Army because I was only 37 years old. They thought I had a career yet to do. And I explained to them that I had done over 20 years, and I had completed a wonderful career in the Army, and I loved it very much, but it was time for me to get out.
Coming back from deployment has definitely changed the way I look at things, just because I was there for 14 months, and like the adjustment is still, I guess I'll probably be adjusting for the rest of my life to it, but just coming home and things not being the same. I would have rather been with my soldiers and helping them instead of being home, because I knew there was a war going on, and I wanted to be over there with them. I didn't want to be home on the other side, not being able to do anything about it. And I guess that was my hardest thing coming home. Knowing that I would get letters and emails from friends saying, yeah, we got blown up and so died and this and that and the other. It was probably, that was the worst thing for me, because I couldn't be there to help them.
Oh, I was excited. I was super excited. I couldn't wait to come home. Civilian clothes and civilian food, McDonald's and Burger King and KFC and all that, pop and everything. So I couldn't wait to come home and be done, go back to my normal life, you know. I came back, and as soon as I got back, I went back to work pretty quickly, probably almost too quickly. I didn't really allow myself time to kind of adjust back into the civilian world of, you know, I didn't have to worry about a lot of the things that I did when I was over in Iraq, you know, like in the middle of the night and stuff like that. I lost a lot of things in the transition. I lost my marriage because I had changed, just kind of grew away from each other. It affected my kids. I'm still seeing, you know, problems with my kids in the mental health way, but it's a struggle, but it's cool. Like I said, I was excited to come home, but I didn't really foresee any of these problems coming up, you know, in the transition.
Actually, when I got out of the military, I went right into college, and I graduated in 1997 as a respiratory therapist. So I've been doing it since then. I work in the neonatal and pediatric intensive care units at Children's Hospital in Colorado Springs. My combat experience gave me a better sense of how precious life is and how quickly it can turn, and the brutality that we can bring upon another person, and how do we offset that. And living my life now, I try to offset the brutality that's out there in the world. I really had not seen what we could do to another person until I was in combat and the suffering from that. So I try to, not so much atone, as atone I don't think would be the correct word, but to give more in the world is more of a good than a bad.
I was never wounded during my service. My medical conditions that I have are service connected. We found them while I was deployed in Iraq on my second trip. And basically wound up getting medically retired because of them eventually, but that's just the way it goes. I had some chest pain and went to the ER, and they found out that I had an aortic aneurysm in my aortic root that was being caused by a heart valve issue. So wearing the body armor and the extra weight and everything like that compounded the aneurysm and actually made it worse. So that was probably what the chest pain was the aneurysm getting a little bit worse. Can't fly with an aneurysm, so they put me out.
I have a difficulty in hearing, and I attribute that to the night of Tet when I was in that very large explosion. And no, I'm very fortunate. I mean, I'm 77 years old, and a lot of people can't keep up with me.
I was diagnosed with PTSD, and when I returned home and I went to the VA, and I was diagnosed at 30%. And at the time, like, I didn't really realize the way that I was being around my family and everything like that, but I was probably not the best person to be around. Last year is when I decided I needed to go and get help. I got body last year, the end of July. Being a person in the military, it's hard for people to know what it's like to have somebody in the military. And these days especially with the wars going on all the time and getting deployed every couple of years and stuff. So it's crucial for those people who do have those military people to support them.
There's a lot of problems with anger, like dealing with stuff. A lot of problems are alcohol. Alcohol is a huge problem. A lot of vets turn into alcohol. For me, I turned into alcohol, and it turned into alcoholism, and then I became a massive alcoholic. And so, after I kind of was at the edge, and my ex-wife told me, again, you know, this was the first time that she told me, you need to go get help. And I mean, I had fought it the whole time, but I wound up throwing a chair through a wall, is what happened. And then she told me basically, you know, let's either go get help or we're out of here. So I went and got help, and I quit drinking, which helped a lot. That helped a lot. I'm still sober. But like I said, I still go weekly to my therapists, and I have to talk about my week, and we still work on different ways to cope with things. And my therapist helps me be more aware of myself. No, I'll never touch the medical field again. Don't ever want to do it again. I've done so much over there that when I come home, I don't want to be put back into that feeling again. I don't want to do it again. Brings up too many memories and triggers, and I just don't want to do it. It's tough. I dealt a lot with PTSD. I even went and did a 7-week program at the VA in Denver, the 7 West program, which helped a lot. I mean, I still go see my VA therapists, my psychiatrists, and all that stuff. They tell me it's going to be an ongoing battle until the day that I die. So I think that was the biggest impact in my life, and will be in the future.
They didn't have that word PTSD when I got out of the military. That was not a word that was there. There were a lot of people who were suffering odd afflictions, different types of rashes and stuff. What I noticed when I got back from the Persian Gulf, I was allergic to cinnamon. I was never allergic to cinnamon before, and I was allergic to cinnamon for about 10 years, you know, it's only when I got back from the Persian Gulf War that I discover I couldn't eat cinnamon anymore. I hear loud sounds on the ground, low crawling, find out where you're at, get back up. Say, oh, you didn't see that, did you? I was able to, you know, talk myself down most of the time in the civilian world when it came into situations. You know, I would overreact to loud sounds and stuff, and so it took me a while to, for myself to say, you know, it's safe, it's all right. You know, you don't have to react that way to that.
The transition back to civilian on my first trip, I did it too fast. I went back to work way too fast. I knew that I had issues with stuff. I was drinking a lot. I had to stop drinking. A lot of anger issues. Would yell a lot. Startle easy. It was hard on my family.
I guess you can say I kind of work with a group, mostly volunteer stuff, but called Canines Providing Assistance to Wounded Warriors, to try and change the laws about service dogs for people who have PTSD and traumatic brain injury. And then also I volunteer now with the lady that helped me train her to get hours so I can help train service dogs for veterans. And I'm going to school for psychology to where I can hopefully graduate next year and then go do my PhD and help veterans with PTSD.
I'm retired now, so I don't really have a job. I get to do kind of what I want at my own leisure. It's kind of nice. I ride my motorcycle a lot. I hang out with friends that are retired as well. Kind of keep each other company sometimes. Just kind of spontaneous. Maybe a road trip. Sometimes we get a wild hair and we decide we want a road trip out of state or something, you know, for a couple days. Just kind of spontaneous stuff, wherever you want to be.
One of our warrant officers that worked with me at Fort Hood, when I was at Fort Hood, Texas, we were at the Troop Medical Clinic, and I was doing my regular rounds of doing vital signs and everything and talking to the patients and stuff. And she came up to me and she said, you know, with your skills, the way you go about your tasks, you would make a really good respiratory therapist. Because I hadn't really thought about what I would be, probably a paramedic, you know, it could be an EMT, you know, ride the ambulance is always fun. So I looked into it, and I saw what a respiratory therapist was, and, you know, read about it, and that really intrigued me, and that's what I've done since then.
Hawk will recognize my anxieties and other issues with my PTSD. And his responses to that is to come up and either nudge my leg or he'll get in my lap if I'm sitting. So those are the two things that he does with that. And I just pet him then. And that helps with the symptoms. Had to go back to Boston, trained with him for 2 weeks, and came back, and he's been with me since. Good addition to my team. I needed somebody to be a battle buddy, to come hang out with me at the times when I'm not hanging out with other people. So Hawk does that. He fills that void really well. He's a really good dog.
And so I was discharged, and then I had to go to work. I was licensed as a physician assistant in the state of Washington, and I practiced medicine as a physician's assistant, and I worked mainly in surgery for 32 years, and I retired again. End of story.
Knowing what I know now, would I join the military again today? That's a interesting question.
It's funny you said that because my son's considering the military.
Some days it's yes, and some days it's no.
You know, I told him, I said, just make sure that you're going into the military for a purpose. Don't go into the military because it's the last thing you think that'll bail you out. You know, you have nothing else, so I'll just go in the military. I don't think that's the right reason. You'll go in and you probably hate the military.
And again, I would join. The experiences that I had in the military, even with going to war, really molded me in the way that I am today.
You can do anything if you really put your mind to it. If you have the desire and the compassion and persistence, you can do anything, and the military will let you do anything.
I would. I think the military is one of the best things anybody can do. It teaches you respect and discipline, and if you like it, then continue to do it.
Yeah, I'd serve again. I wouldn't have a problem. A lot of the things I tell people that come to me nowadays and ask me, hey, I want to join the military, what do you think? I'm like, okay. So if you're going to join the military, just get something out of it. Something that you can do. Something that you can use. Not a really big call for riflemen when you get out of the infantry.
But if you go in with a sense of purpose of, you know, you want to go to school, or you want to get this job training and then go to school, I think that's good. I think it's great. But I think it's an awesome thing. We do a lot of good stuff.
Keep your head down and your mouth shut. Stay behind the other person if you can, out of the way of the drill sergeant. Learn everything you can. Take everything in, and you know, keep to your goals. Follow the rules.
We hope you enjoyed the film Medic. The Westminster High School staff and students were so proud of the work we did on this movie, and we'd like to thank Congressman Perlmutter for the opportunity.
Well, we appreciate the high school for pitching in, and we understand so many classes and departments were involved. This is the fourth in a series of films that we've done as part of the Veterans History Project, which is a project sponsored by the Library of Congress as part of their American Folklore and Folklife series. So we are very proud to have you guys participate in this. The other films we've made have been placed with the Library of Congress, have been viewed by many people, and I know this film and all of its really interesting interviews will get the same kind of play in Washington and elsewhere.
And we're very proud to be the first high school to do one of these films. That's amazing for us. We had a lot of students that were able to participate in this, our video cinema arts class, as well as our IB history class and our graphic design class. We're all able to be a part of this, as well as some of our music courses. We were able to perform some of the scores in the video as well. So our kids did an amazing job like they always do, but it really helped us focus in on our problem-based learning that we have going on right now as well.
Well, and the subject is a very serious one about the realities of war, both the glories of war and the terrible side of war. And you know, for the kids to interview and participate in this is very, I think, important to their learning, but to the learning of the community. So I'm just glad that Westminster High School was willing to take on this task, because one, it's a tough one because you learn some tough stories, and two, to put this kind of production together really requires a lot of work, a lot of effort, and some professionalism.
A lot of the kids told me that some of the hardest but most rewarding parts were listening to the veteran stories. I think it was a real eye-opener for our students to understand what those veterans were going through, and also the help that they gave to the soldiers that were in combat.
Well, so the help they gave in combat and the help that some of them have needed after combat. And so, you know, these kinds of stories are what the Library of Congress is looking to preserve so that future generations really know, what we've gone through in some of the conflicts that we've faced. And, these productions are going to outlive all of us.
Right.
They are going to be part of the history of the United States of America, and this school should be very proud that they've participated in putting something like this together.
Absolutely, and we want to thank you again for that opportunity, and as always, proud of our kids, but it wouldn't have been able to be proud of them without your willingness to allow us to take on this project.
I just want to thank Westminster High School for all of its hard work and for the students who participated in this project. It's going to be something all of us will remember for a very long time. Thanks again.
I went to a reunion a couple years ago where our unit got together, and I was talking with one of the lab technicians, and I said, I cannot believe how you kept up with the blood. We use gallons and gallons of blood, sometimes on one patient. And he said, we had our way. And I said, what was the way? I had forgot, but near where our hospital was located was a place called LBJ. That was Long Bend Jail. And it was where the bad boys of the Army that, that did bad things, stealing, AWOL, or any other thing, violation that they could have done, that's where they were sent to jail. Now, if the guys would agree to give a unit of blood, they got a little extra special privilege or something. So I had this steady flow of blood coming in all the time from young, healthy bad guys. So we had a steady amount of blood.
I was talking to my mom. I can't remember when it was. Mother's Day, Easter, just a Sunday. Talking to her on the phone, and all of a sudden we got mortared. And they just came flying in. And she's like, oh, what's that? And I'm like, oh, sorry, Mom, we're getting mortared. Gotta go, bye. Right, and so now with modern technology, we've got that kind of an issue. Hi, Mom. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, everything's going. Oh, sorry, I might get killed. Talk to you later.
Well, I had an opportunity to drive one of our physicians around to the other different units. And I would see the different units walking around with Pepsi. I would go into their little, meal tent, and they would have different types of cereals. They didn't only have chicken soup for the cup of soup. They had different types of beverages. And I'm like, why don't we get this? Why do we only have, Sprite and some Life cereal? We don't really have very much else, as our supply guy, not, very good. So at the different units, I would see everybody have this, and I was wondering what was going on. Well, during our time, everybody would be losing weight except our cooks. But we didn't think about it too hard. We just thought maybe, because they cooked their meals, they always were able to eat their meals. And one day, one of the burners got a little too close to the side of the tent, and the tent started to burn. And the quarters for the cooks were at the back of that tent. They were blocked off, they had some privacy and everything. So their bunks and all of their equipment was at the back of that tent. So of course they yelled, fire, fire, come and help the fire. As we went in to save their equipment, we would turn over their bunks to get their equipment. There were cases of Pepsi, cases of cereal, of Captain Crunch, and different types of cereal. And the first thing I thought of, after months of eating barely anything decent to eat, I saw that Captain Crunch, and that's what I grabbed. Other people were grabbing cases of Pepsi and Coke, and we just started running out of the tent. We left their equipment. And so the bartering started. I will give you 3 boxes of Captain Crunch for 2 cans of Pepsi. And we got told ever so nicely, is there any way that you can spare a pair of uniforms for the cooks, since all of their equipment burned? So we were kind of generous, but not great generous, because we were like, they kept the good food from us. You know, why should we? So that was a mentality we had, but that was funny, jumping into a burning tent for a case of Captain Crunch.